You know those classic cartoons everyone remembers fondly, right? The ones with Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, that cheerful, bouncing theme? But here's what you don't know. Behind those bright colors and cheerful music lies a story of corporate negligence, racist censorship, exploitation of artists, and one producer who literally traded screen credit for a raise he refused to give. Warner Brothers accidentally abandoned hundreds of their own cartoons. 3 contain racism so severe the studio literally let them rot in public domain rather than claim ownership. Today I'm revealing 10 wild facts about Merrie Melodies' public domain episodes that will completely change how you see Golden Age animation. Merrie Melodies. Number 10. Your childhood classics were corporate trash. Think those public domain Merrie Melodies fell into your hands through some legal technicality decades later? Try 1 year. Warner Bros. And United Artists didn't slowly lose track of these cartoons over time. They forgot to file paperwork and abandoned them almost immediately. All cartoons from 1929 to 1931 are public domain, every single one. United Artists had one job in 1960: renew the copyright. They didn't. But that's just neglect. It gets darker. Warner Brothers knew exactly which cartoons were slipping away in 1968. 3 of them contained such extreme racism that rather than renew the copyright and take responsibility, they let them rot. Jungle Jitters, Hittin' the Trail for Hallelujah Land. All this and Rabbit Stew. Warner Brothers made a calculated business decision that owning these cartoons would damage their brand more than losing them. They're so ashamed of Jungle Jitters, they literally let anyone use it for free rather than have their name attached. And that wasn't the end of Warner's copyright disasters. By 1943, the studio abandoned even more cartoons, this time because they were too busy making war propaganda. The most recent short to fall into public domain? Puss in Booty from 1943. Remember that date. We'll come back to what Warner Brothers was really doing in 1943. Number 9. A producer built his empire by refusing to pay artists. Leon Schlesinger created the empire we know as Warner Bros. Cartoons. He's the name in the credits on hundreds of Merrie Melodies. But Schlesinger didn't animate, didn't write, didn't create characters. What did he do? He kept overhead costs at an absolute minimum. The man who built Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Porky Pig was simply and often ruthlessly committed to making the most money based on the artistic genius of others. His animators worked in a building so decrepit they nicknamed it Termite Terrace. When they organized a union and demanded fair wages in 1941, Schlesinger shut down the entire studio for 6 days. This became known as the Looney Tune lockout. He held the careers of hundreds of artists hostage rather than pay them fairly. Here's the calculation Schlesinger made. Harmon and Ising wanted bigger budgets to compete with Disney. Schlesinger said no. They left in 1933 and took Bosco, Warner's biggest star, with them. Schlesinger didn't panic. He knew something the artists didn't. He could always find cheaper talent desperate for work during the Great Depression. And he was right. Number 8. The first star vanished. Because creators learned from Disney's mistake, Bosco was Warner Bros.' first recurring character, the star of 39 Looney Tunes shorts from 1930 to 1933. Rivaled Mickey Mouse in popularity. Then he vanished overnight. Why? Harmon and Ising had watched Disney lose Oswald the Lucky Rabbit because Walt didn't own the character rights. They weren't making that mistake. When they created Bosco in 1928, they copyrighted him immediately. Hugh Harmon registered the character with the U.S. Copyright Office on January 3, 1928 as a Negro boy. When Schlesinger refused their budget demands in 1933, they took Bosco and walked. Warner Bros.' biggest star belonged to the artists, not the studio. Schlesinger was left with nothing. No Bosco, no recurring characters, just the names Looney Tunes and Merrie Melodies. He had to start over, scrambling to create Buddy, Beans the cat, eventually Porky Pig. This single contract dispute forced Warner Bros. To invent the characters that would define animation history. Bugs Bunny exists because Harmon and Ising owned Bosco. And remember that copyright on file? That registration as a Negro boy? That becomes critical. In fact, number 5. Number 7. Bootleggers mutilated the cartoons and sold them back to you. In the 1970s, a company called Radio and Television Packagers saw an opportunity. Dozens of Merrie Melodies had fallen into public domain. Anyone could use them, distribute them, change them, so they did. Radio and Television Packagers commissioned Fred Ladd to redraw and colorize the black and white cartoons. Without Warner Bros.' permission, without quality control, they retraced every other frame, halving the animation quality. They replaced entire soundtracks. They changed titles. One More Time became On Duty. Moonlight for Two became Barnyard Frolic. And these butchered versions are what you've been watching your entire life. Every low-budget VHS tape, every unofficial DVD collection, every public domain cartoon compilation on YouTube. The versions most people have seen aren't the originals. They're unauthorized corporate vandalism. Warner Brothers couldn't stop it. They didn't own the cartoons anymore. And here's the kicker. Some of these bootleg versions are now copyrighted separately from the originals. The hack job has legal protection the original art doesn't. Number 6. The voice behind every character traded credit for money he never got. Mel Blanc voiced nearly every major character in Merrie Melodies. Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Sylvester, Tweety, Yosemite Sam. 400 distinct voices across 5,000 cartoons. The man of 1,000 voices. But for years, nobody knew his name. Voice actors received no screen credit in Hollywood. They were invisible, anonymous. Then, in 1944, Mel Blanc became the first voice actor in history to receive on-screen credit, starting with a Bugs Bunny short. How did he break this barrier? He asked Leon Schlesinger for a raise. Schlesinger said no, so Blanc made a deal. According to his autobiography, Schlesinger gave him screen credit instead of a salary increase. Read that again. Blanc revolutionized the voice acting industry because his boss refused to pay him more. The compromise made Blanc famous, but kept him locked in an exclusive contract until 1960. He couldn't work for other studios, couldn't voice Woody Woodpecker past 4 cartoons because Schlesinger owned him. And every other voice actor at Warner Bros.? They worked in obscurity for years. Blanc got famous. His colleagues stayed anonymous. All because Schlesinger found a cheaper way to keep his best talent than actually paying them. Number 5. The Censored 11 reveals what studios normalized. 11 Merrie Melodies and Looney Tunes cartoons were pulled from syndication in 1968. United Artists banned them from television for racist depictions of African Americans. This group became known as the Censored 11, and 3 of them are public domain. The racism isn't subtext, it isn't implied. These cartoons feature minstrel show caricatures, blackface stereotypes, grotesque designs. Jungle Jitters shows Africans as cannibals preparing a salesman for a cooking pot. The salesman chooses death over marrying the cannibal queen. This is the plot of a children's cartoon. The short currently holds a 4.9 out of 10 on IMDb, making it the second lowest-rated cartoon of the Censored 11. Friz Freleng directed it, one of the legendary directors. Remember Bosco being registered as a Negro boy? By 1935, when Harmon and Ising redesigned him at MGM, they transformed him into an identifiable African-American stereotype with exaggerated features. The character was discontinued. These weren't fringe cartoons. They were mainstream entertainment, played before feature films in theaters across America. Ted Turner, when he acquired the rights in 1986, vowed never to distribute the Censored 11. Warner Brothers continues that ban today, except for the public domain ones. Those they can't control. Number 4. A fairy godfather taught soldiers to survive with dirty jokes. While Warner Brothers was abandoning Merrie Melodies to public domain neglect, they were secretly creating something else. 27 cartoons you've probably never seen. Private Snafu, produced from 1943 to 1945, exclusively for the military. These weren't theatrical releases. They were classified. Only servicemen could watch them. The U.S. Army Signal Corps commissioned Warner Bros. To create training films featuring a bumbling private who made every mistake imaginable. The name? Private Snafu. Situation normal, all fouled up, except fouled wasn't the original word. The cartoons were directed by Chuck Jones, Friz Freleng, Frank Tashlin, Bob Clampett. Written by Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, voiced by Mel Blanc. The same creative team behind Merrie Melodies, but with one difference. These cartoons bypassed the Hays Code. They could show things theatrical cartoons couldn't. Women in their underwear, sexual innuendo, Snafu dying from his mistakes, going to hell, the devil wearing a swastika. These cartoons were risque, adult, and darkly hilarious. And because they were produced for the US government, they're all public domain. They were never copyrighted. Anyone can use them. The irony? The cartoons Warner Brothers carefully crafted for the military are free. The ones they accidentally abandoned haunt them forever. Number 3. Warner Brothers chose war propaganda over copyright. Why did so many cartoons fall into public domain in the early 1940s? Look at what Warner Brothers was doing, instead of renewing paperwork. In 1943, the studio launched the Blue Ribbon Reissue program. They stopped making enough new cartoons, started repackaging old ones. Why? Resources were diverted to government-commissioned films like Private Snafu. Production of new Looney Tunes and Merrie Melodies dropped dramatically. The studio was fulfilling contracts to theaters by recycling older shorts. Preparing reissues cost far less than creating original content. But here's the trap. They were so focused on wartime production and cost-cutting they forgot to maintain their back catalog. United Artists, who held distribution rights, stopped renewing copyrights. Puss in Booty slipped into public domain in 1943. The same year, Private Snafu began. Warner Brothers was making animation history training soldiers while simultaneously losing legal control of their own cartoon library. They chose wartime relevance over protecting their archive. And remember that animation lockout in 1941? Schlesinger shut down the studio when animators demanded raises. By 1943, other studios like Disney, MGM, and Walter Lantz had unionized. Schlesinger gave in. But the damage was done. The labor disruption, the war, the reissue program, all combined into a perfect storm of corporate negligence. Number 2. The studio that invented Bugs. Bunny couldn't afford him. Leon Schlesinger built an empire from nothing. After Harmon and Ising left with Bosco in 1933, he recruited Friz Freleng, Tex Avery, Bob Clampett, Chuck Jones, the greatest directors in animation history. They created Porky Pig in 1935, Daffy Duck in 1937. Bugs Bunny officially debuted in 1940. Warner Brothers cartoons became the most successful animation studio in America. And in 1944, Leon Schlesinger sold everything to Warner Brothers. Why? He was making cartoons for $6,000 each. Disney was spending $10,000 per cartoon. Schlesinger kept costs low by recycling footage, underpaying artists, refusing raises. But he couldn't compete long-term. Warner Bros. Bought him out. Schlesinger remained as a producer until his death in 1949, but he was no longer the owner. The studio that produced Looney Tunes and Merrie Melodies, that created Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, existed because one man spent 15 years exploiting artists to minimize costs. And when those costs finally caught up, he sold the whole thing. Remember Mel Blanc's exclusive contract? Schlesinger negotiated that in 1941. By 1944, he'd sold the studio, but Blanc was still locked in. Blanc didn't control his own career until 1960. The man who created the voice of Bugs Bunny couldn't work for anyone else for 19 years. Number 1. Public domain means no one's accountable. Here's what this all means. Every public domain Merrie Melodies cartoon exists in a legal vacuum. No copyright owner, no one to issue takedowns, no one to sue bootleggers, no one responsible for racist content. Warner Brothers can't censor Jungle Jitters because they don't own it. They can't remove it from circulation. They can't add disclaimers or historical context. The cartoon they made, that bears their legacy, is beyond their control. And that's the real cost of copyright negligence. It's not just lost revenue, it's lost accountability. The 3 cartoons from the censored 11 that are public domain, they circulate freely on VHS, DVD, YouTube, presented without context, without warnings, without the disclaimers Warner Brothers adds to the ones they do control. Public domain doesn't mean freedom. It means no one's responsible. The same negligence that abandoned these cartoons also abandoned the people harmed by them. Radio and television packagers butchered the art, bootleggers profit from racist stereotypes, and the artists who created these cartoons under exploitation, their names appear in credits on cartoons that were considered corporate trash. Schlesinger made millions. Warner Brothers built an empire. The artists got termite terrace and a lockout. This is the hidden history of Merrie Melodies: corporate greed, racial exploitation, labor abuse, and strategic abandonment. Every public domain cartoon is evidence. These aren't just forgotten cartoons, they're abandoned crime scenes. Warner Brothers walked away from their own legacy because protecting it cost more than losing it. The art survived, the accountability didn't. Speaking of studios exploiting the talent that built their empires, the story of Mickey Mouse's original voice actor makes Leon Schlesinger look generous. Walt Disney didn't just refuse raises, he erased the man from history entirely. Watch that next to see how far animation studios will go to control the voices that made them fortunes. And if you want to understand how animation history really works, subscribe, because nobody else is telling you what actually happened behind these cartoons.